G'day everybody, my name is Elliot Waters and you're listening to the Dysregulated Podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show, feel free to like, subscribe, give the show a great rating because it's good for the algorithm, and you can share it around with your mates, and you can follow me on Instagram at elliot.t.waters. Okay, so I've just come home from therapy, so I'm just going to dump all these thoughts and hopefully it makes sense to people. But as I said, I've just been there. As a little thing prior to me beginning, I have the driest mouth at the moment, and it's for two reasons. Well, three reasons actually. One is medication, so I get dry mouth anyway. Two is I've been doing a lot of talking in therapy, and three is therapy itself because it's anxiety provoking. So the dry mouth response certainly is doing its thing, but there's a physical way, that I did an episode years ago about how mental health isn't just all in your head, and this is sort of another example of the fact that mental health infiltrates everything, and that's why we want to get it looking good. So anyway, physical responses as well, that's all happening too. So therapy, what did I even do? Did more EMDR again and talking to my parts. So two parts came up. So there's, I talk about the 16-year-old. Well, there's this workaholic that's deep inside too. This workaholic that is always pushing me to do more. It's the workaholic that tells me that working full-time hours isn't enough and that I need to be doing more. It's the workaholic that tells me that I'm sick, but it doesn't matter how sick I am, I have to go to work because that's just what you got to do, because that means you're made of the right stuff. This workaholic part is trying. So remember, all these parts in internal family systems therapy, right? All these parts are sub-personalities. Let's look at them as entities. So this hard-working workaholic is an embodiment, essentially, of some of my mentors when I was in the transport industry, because they were very much about, big hours, never sick, and if you are, you do whatever it takes to get in, completely ruin yourself. Romanticizing work and working too hard and stress and burnout and glorifying it in some ways as well too. And the idea was to do that so I would then have a good, strong work ethic. And I thank them for sort of doing this little act on me because it worked. But the problem is with so many of the components of my psyche, this particular one has gone way too far and I've got to rein it back in. So this workaholic believes very much so that we need to keep working harder, because if we don't, that means we're not a good person. So I obsess a lot over working hours and stuff. There was an article in the Batuta Advocate, right? So for those that don't know, the Batuta Advocate is a satire newspaper here in Australia, and they did an article about a financial worker, a banker, complaining that they were burnt out while wearing a T-shirt that was created by people in Bangladesh doing 72-hour shifts straight in a sweatshop. And I read that and I was like, yeah, I am that financial guy. Like, I am weak. I'm, pathetic. I live in Australia. What do I complain about? I should be working 15-hour days or more because, I've got the opportunity here in Australia to do so many amazing things that other people in other parts of the world maybe don't. So I feel very guilty when I'm not working. I feel guilty that I'm being ignorant to the fact that other people have got it worse in that sense. And I don't know, it's a weird construct. It's weird. What's even weirder is that, the inner critic I talk about a lot too. The inner critic and this workaholic, I thought they were one and the same, but they're not. They're two separate parts. So what we think, me and my therapist, what we think is happening is that the workaholic is protecting me from the judgments of the inner critic. So if this part makes me work, the inner critic can't say anything then because I'm satisfying what it wants, which is just, a ridiculous, illogical belief that, how many hours you work equals how good of a person you are. I don't know. It's weird. But yeah, so it's very technical, but that is what we think. The workaholic is protecting me from the inner critic. And, so that's the thing. See, I'm coming to these conclusions myself. This isn't necessarily my therapist saying, I think this is what's happening. This is me in EMDR coming to these conclusions myself. And it's pretty cool, and it's quite enlightening, and it's sort of scary. But yeah, so the inner critic, once again, is the bane of my existence, and the workaholic is just one of the parts that he's trying to stop the inner critic from having anything to say. And the 16-year-old does the same thing, Remember, I go on about how the 16-year-old doesn't want me to get ripped off anymore for, not being cool and stuff. Like, if I dived into that, which I may do very soon in therapy, I'd say that 16-year-old part maybe is also protecting me from the inner critic. So both of these parts, and there's more, I just haven't discovered them yet, are working to alleviate the concerns of the inner critic, because getting ripped off by the inner critic hurts, and it's painful, and we don't want that. What I would like to dive into more and try and figure out is this inner critic, like, is it like a one sort of singular entity, or do people in my life that have maybe ripped me off over the years, are they part of the inner critic? Like, is their voice a part of the inner critic's voice when it says I'm not doing good enough, or, I wonder, or if the inner critic's doing this more objectively, but it's been, I don't know, like it doesn't have direct input from these people in my past, but maybe their effects have shaped the inner critic to how it is today. I'm not sure. I don't know if they're one and the same, it all blends into one, or if it's separate. But, oh man, it's doing my head in. I tell you what, I hope this sort of makes sense. But as I say, I literally just come back from therapy, so I'm sort of trying to remember everything that was said. There was a comment that was made which was a bit sad, I suppose, because I said, because we're doing sort of the workaholic, I'm incompetent, I'm not good enough, I don't work hard enough sort of construct sort of idea. But then there's the other arm, remember, of the relationship stuff. And I said to my psychologist, you think this is full on, wait until, we get down to the deep levels of this relationship problem. And she said, yes, we will do that one day, but to warn you, it might be years away. I was like, what the hell? Years away? I don't have enough time. I've got things to do. That gets the inner critic going. Why are you being so soft? Just get out there and do it. Oh. Anyway, so that was a bit of a comment. I was like, I know I'm in this for the long haul. I know. That's why I'm going every week. I'm not mucking around this time. This is serious. But I don't know. When do I reach the top of the mountain? I don't know. I can't answer that question. Let's not think about that question and move on. But that was therapy today. So what she also got me to do, I forgot, this is quite enlightening, was I had to imagine that I'm at the dinner table, and on my left is the inner critic sitting there, hello, and on the right is the workaholic part, hello, and the other parts are out in the front room. And essentially what I'm doing in therapy is I'm talking to these parts directly. My therapist will say, what does the inner critic have to say about that? And you'll never believe it, but in my mind, this inner critic construct starts talking. It's weird. Like, I can't picture the inner critic or any of the other parts that is as like in human form, but it feels like it. Like it's a feeling more than like a mental image. But we did get the conjure up the image of sitting at the dinner table. And I was asking both of them, I was like, look, what are we trying to achieve here? What's the story? The inner critic needs a lot of work. There was a lot of illogical stuff going on there, which I'll talk about in on another day. But this workaholic part, protecting from the inner critic's harsh judgments, that to me was huge, and it explains so much. Because that's the thing. Like, if I'm not working, I feel guilty. I complain a lot about how sleepy and tired and fatigued I am. Well, let me tell you, I actually also wear my fatigue as a badge of honor. Seriously, it's almost like the more tired that I am, the better, more successful, deserving person that I am. It's so convoluted. It's so twisted, these thoughts. They're just wrong. They're so wrong. It's going to take a long time to sort of straighten them out a bit. But to see what the workaholic sort of was thinking was pretty cool, and it sort of has refocused me on this inner critic. I need to talk to this inner critic big time. Not ready yet. We will be, but not yet. And say, look, mate, what's going on? What are you afraid of? Can we do it my way? Because that last thing, I'm rattling on a bit, but as I said, I've come straight from therapy. This is as raw as it gets. But where I think all this is heading, I think it's becoming more and more clear. I thought at first the inner critic was the one. That was the schema, the concept, the one I needed to go after and straighten out. But I don't think so. I think it's going to come back, surprise, surprise, to someone who I haven't spoken to in a while, my inner child. I have a very strong feeling that there's another layer, which is the inner critic is trying to protect the inner child. My inner child, that whenever I imagine it, in therapy or in my own meditations, in the corner, looking away, scared, petrified, rounded shoulders, all that sort of stuff. And I'm probably about 4 years old, 4 years old. And it's always the same whenever I think, even now I'm thinking it while I'm talking. And I've got a feeling, very much so, that it's all going to brew down to my poor inner child needs healing. But to get to my inner child, there's a few other parts that have jumped in to protect it, that they need to be satisfied that what I'm doing, the self, what I'm doing is the right way and will not put the inner child, my inner child, in danger. And that is exactly what they're trying to get me to do. This is why in internal family systems therapy, it's made very clear that there's no evil parts. They're just trying to do their best as best they can to try and protect the individual in some way or another. So even my inner critic, who I'm talking a little bit roughly about, he can handle it though, trust me. But even my inner critic, like I said, I am very confident it will come out that it is just trying to protect my inner child. And hey, that's a very honourable thing to do. That ain't a bad person. That's a good part that's just trying, but just needs to maybe trust me, the self, because I've got a few more years experience. I think I know a better way to do this. And one of those ways is by keeping on going to therapy. So there you go. That's my therapy reflections for this week. There's a bit going on, but to sum up, still working on the whole incompetent sort of feeling, but we've introduced the workaholic part and my inner critic. I've invited them to the table, and now I'm having some strong words with them to try and convince them that me, the self, knows the way forward. Please trust me, please, because the way that we're doing things at the moment is not sustainable. It is not sustainable at all, and something needs to change. But as far as like working too much and stuff goes, that won't change unless the workaholic is satisfied. And that is the goal moving forward. But it's great to invite them to the table. It's really good. And, like old friends. And seriously, I think of it like that, as I said, I can't see like humans sitting in a chair, but I can feel it. It's a feeling. And it is like old friends. There's no hate here. There's a bit of frustration, and I'm sort of over it, but, because, seriously, guys, just listen to me for once, will you? But at the same time, it's very sort of comforting. So there you go. Very interesting. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you next time here on the Dysregulated Podcast.